we're ready for our first talk to kick off the day. I just got an email from Jennifer Foster, who is ill this morning and is so disappointed that she cannot be here for your talk. She's going to listen as soon as she can on YouTube. She's got the channel queued up to be ready. But it's kind of good I can introduce Caelan Goss because he is actually a math major. So we claim him even though he's presenting for another school. And we are very much looking forward to your talk.
Okay, so as you can see on the screen, I'd like to be talking about something called the contingency argument for the existence of God. And so a very light topic to start off with. I do want to point out that from a historical perspective, this argument was popularized by a mathematician, also a philosopher. His name is Gottfried Leibniz. So we'll get into the argument. First off, I want to define some terms because inherent to this argument is that we know what the terms are. Like this one. Contingent. Something is contingent if it occurs or exists only if certain other circumstances are the case. Or in other words, if something is dependent upon something else. In contrast to that, something is necessary or not contingent if it occurs or exists regardless of other circumstances, and in other words, if it's independent of anything else. So we have two kind of mutually exclusive claims here, contingent and not contingent. But I'll be referring to it as necessary and contingent for the most part. Now, I'll do a brief overview of what the argument entails with the premises, and then we'll take a further look into the premises themselves and possible objections to them. So first off, we have our premise 1. If something exists, then it has an explanation of its existence such that it is contingent or necessary. And we have our premise 2, that the universe exists. Premise 3, the universe has an explanation of its existence such that it is contingent or necessary. And this just follows from premise 1 and premise 2. And we have our premise 4. This will probably be the most contentious premise of the argument, is that the explanation of the existence of the universe comes from it being contingent upon an external source rather than the universe being necessary. That is to say that something caused the universe. Our premise 5 states that this external source has an explanation for its existence such that it is contingent or necessary. And if you look back at our premise 1 and our premise 4, this just follows from those two. And finally, our premise 6 states that ultimately, this external source has an explanation for its existence such that it is necessary. And we can gain a conclusion from all of these premises bundled up together, is that the explanation of the universe is embedded in a necessary external source. And so this is the justification for what theists call God, or this is a justification for what theists call God. There are multiple other arguments like these, but this is what this argument leads to in its conclusion if all the premises hold true. Now what we'll do is we'll look at the possible objections to the premises. So the way that you show that this entire argument is false is if you point at one of these premises and you say, hey look, this premise is wrong throughout the entire argument. So first off, we'll look at premise 1. Again, premise 1 says if something exists and it has an explanation such that it is contingent or necessary. And like we said at the beginning, these two terms are mutually exclusive, contingent and not contingent. So this goes back to the laws of logic dealt with by Aristotle. So we go to the law of excluded middle. And this premise is true by saying that something will fit into one of two categories, if it's A or not A. So something, if it exists, will fall into contingent or not contingent. So this premise seems to hold true by laws of, fundamental laws of logic. So we're 1 for 1. premise 2, the universe exists. I mean, there are people that want to, contend with this, but hopefully nobody here. Premise 3, the universe has an explanation of its existence such that it is contingent or necessary. And like we said earlier, if premise 1 and premise 2 are true, then this one just logically follows from that. And premise 4. So this is going to be the most contentious, and this is where things start to heat up in this argument. You may recall that premise 4 states that the explanation of the existence of the universe comes from it being contingent upon an external source. So if someone were trying to disprove this premise, they would take the negation of it and try to show that the negation of the premise is true. And so the negation of this premise would be the explanation of the existence of the universe comes from it being not contingent. And we still know what that term means. It means necessary. Now, if we are looking at this negation of the premise, we are able to draw a few implications of this statement. The first being that the universe is necessary, since not contingent means necessary. The next thing might not be straightly obvious, but the next thing we can see is that since something that is necessary exists independently of everything else, like we had in our definition from the beginning, we can come to the conclusion that the universe must have always existed and will always exist. Therefore, we have a universe that must be eternal or it must be timeless. And that just follows also from the regular definition of necessary, where if something is necessary, it has to be there, which means always. But there's a problem. If the universe is eternal, then leading up to where we are now, we must have had an infinite number of causes preceding us. But if we have an infinite number of causes preceding us, did we ever really even have a first cause that started the entire chain of causes that led up to the point to where we are now? This is a problem called infinite regress. Philosophers and theologians a long time ago said that an infinite regress is impossible. And it's like saying that you have an infinite amount of dominoes knocking each other over, but you can never find the beginning. And if there is no first domino that fell to knock over the next domino, then none of them would have fallen. And so this infinite regress problem shows up if the universe is not contingent. That is to say, if the universe is necessary, then we have an infinite regress. And if the universe is contingent, then there is some external cause of the universe. Therefore, we conclude that the universe must be contingent upon some external source rather than it being necessary in and of itself, since the implication of an infinite regress is impossible. And premise 5, this is another one of those premises that just follows logically if you accept some of the preceding premises, namely 1 and 4. And now we get to the last premise. Ultimately, this external source has an explanation for its existence such that it is necessary. So the reason that I added premise 5 that leads to this premise was because I know that some may want to claim that, sure, the universe is contingent, but I know people may want to posit a multiverse theory. You may have heard of that. So they'll want to say it's contingent upon a multiverse and not upon God. So premise 5 and 6 help to show that even if you were to posit a multiverse theory, it still has this causal chain problem. So ultimately, this external source has an explanation for its existence. And an objection to this would be that, you would have the multiverse. But that is a problem because of the same reason we looked at in premise 4. You cannot have an infinite regress of causes, and you could just keep taking back the multiverse theory to, oh, this multiverse has a multiverse, and a multiverse, and a multiverse, and so on. The preceding causes go back into infinity. And so, the reason why this premise is true is the same reason as premise 4, is that, or that's why I claim that it's true. And so, if we never had the first cause, we never had that first domino falling over, there would be no following causes, and if that were the case, then it wouldn't even make sense why we were here. And so, in the conclusion, we have that the universe, its existence is explained by an external necessary first cause. And we can also see different attributes from this first cause just from this argument alone, but this is not a comprehensive list. One cause that we noted would be that it's eternal. Two other attributes would be that this cause is immaterial and that it's changeless, due to its nature being outside of the universe. Because if you cause the universe, you can't really be inside it. And all of space-time is, in the universe, blah, blah, blah. And the other attribute that we would attribute to it is omnipotence, because if you were to create the universe, or if you were to cause the universe, you must have an immense amount of power. Like I said, other attributes can be attributed to this as well, but this is not a comprehensive list. But these attributes follow into what theists call God, or at least the attributes to the being that theists call God. And so, therefore God exists. Thank you.
Questions for Caelan?